Hello, retro fans. Long time no episode. I know, I'm sorry for this. I got a little bit caught in different topics, and well, as usual, the stuff I started to work on isn't really coming to an end because, well, while fixing or working on fixing the C64 board, I recognize that my power supply is going to make, or well, it's not going to make, it's actually making strange noises. And so I thought before I'm going to hunt down some symptoms which aren't caused by the board, but maybe caused by the power supply, I may build a new one. And yeah, I got a little bit stuck with this one, and but I'm actually close to finish this. And then yeah, I had a couple of other things. I had to print some 3D printed cases for some friends, and got a little bit lost in gaming as well. So actually quite busy, and there's indeed some real world things to handle. So going to work and well, keeping all that stuff running as usual. Anyway, that's not going to be the main topic of this. And yeah, I'd like to talk about the Turbo Chameleon 64 version 2 today. And there's actually some reason behind this, but let's just jump into the topic right now. And here we go, as usual. Let's jump to my desk right now. And here we can see the Turbo Chameleon 64 version 2 and the docking station and some non-related things. Don't pay attention to all that stuff around. Had to make some space on my desk. Anyway, the main reason is actually that many weeks ago, maybe months already, I started to work on my gaming rig, and I want to have devices there I'm usually use for gaming. And so I have the NES and actually Famicom, and I have the Neo Geo Mini, and I had the C64 Mini there as well. And in the past, I was sort of happy with the C64 Mini because it is quite often a very convenient way just to well, plug in a USB stick and play some games. And it's actually quite comfortable. And what I really like is that I can use save states, especially for games where you do not have something like this. And since I'm not that much of a hardcore gamer, I very seldom or rarely play through a game completely. So I really have to do this in chunks, so to say. And having save states is very comfortable. But the C64 Mini is more or less an emulation, and it comes with some flaws and troubles, and one of it is actually that especially for newer games you have to create some sort of configuration files if you want to use joystick 1 or 2 or something like this. If you want to use a different SID type, it usually is using the older SID, this 6581, and the newer stuff isn't. It sounds quite odd quite often. So I got more and more disappointed, and in general, I'm not that much of an emulation fan. So it's not bad. I'm not blaming someone, and I highly appreciate the effort people put into those projects, and every now and then for checking some files, new downloads from CSDB or something like this. It is quite handy, especially if you want to sort this stuff onto your SD drive, USB, whatsoever medias. But I really try to use original hardware as much as possible. But it has some limits as well. And if you want to jump between different systems, for example, then it's getting a bit, well, cumbersome, so to say. I mean, I got most of the 8-bit systems somewhere in boxes. So I got ZX Spectrum, I got Amstrad, I got Ataris and all that stuff, but I do not have the space nor really the patience to set them all up and have them running anytime I want to play them or something like this. So having a system that is actually able to recreate the different systems is indeed very handy, and the analog NT Mini with this open firmware, whatever we want to call this, offers a lot of different so-called cores, and I got most of the stuff covered with this one already. But there are still some things that are missing there, and it looks like that the development of this specific firmware all has been stopped, cancelled, never planned to continue or whatsoever. So I do not expect getting new cores or something like this anytime soon. And the interesting thing about though is that the analog NT Mini is an FPGA system, and the so-called cores are not actually emulating the systems. They are really kind of recreating the system, mostly quite extensively down to the, let's say, IC level. And I would probably fail in a blind test, but for me it feels better than an emulator. But anyway, as I said, I'm probably going to fail in a blind test to detect this. And yeah, not to get lost in this, a few weeks ago, I had a chance to visit a friend, and we were tinkering with the Mister FPGA, and this is a highly interesting project. And I have considered myself going this way a couple of times already, but I'm a bit reluctant because of the costs. It's not cheap, and having an expensive system already, like the analog NT Mini, and having other devices on hand, I'm really reluctant to do so. But it was a very interesting experience, and can have a look inside. Oh, that's the wrong picture. Let's go in this direction. So the Mister FPGA is actually an open source system, and it is hardware you actually combine. And what we can see here, this is the actual Mister. And this is actually connected to some sort of I/O board or something like this, which sometimes not even extend the functionality. And so you can get this in some sort of a closed case, or you can get this in some sort of an enclosure with keyboard or something like this. So, and you can even stack this Mister FPGA up to this guy, I would say. I've seen very interesting constructs on Twitter or on YouTube, because you can add a lot of add-on boards depending on the systems you want to mimic, so to say. And yeah, my friend went for this option. That's a mini PC enclosure or case, whatever you want to call this. Very compact. I really love that all the connectors are on the back of the system, so you do not have any cables spidering out of this. And you can put this on your desk. It is very very small. It's not consuming that much space, and it's not making any noise or something like this. There's a very small fan here to keep that whole system cool, because FPGA systems tend to get a bit warm when stressed. So if they really have to do a lot of gates to, well, recreate, to mimic something like this. And yeah, you can actually operate this with a gamepad as well. And you can add your USB keyboard or whatever you want, or USB joystick, something like this. So it's very, very versatile, but I think for me it's a bit, well, too much. So it's not really that I have to fill a huge gap. I just have a couple of things I'm missing from my current setup, but I do not need this full-blown system. If I wouldn't have much of the hardware I, well, actually have in my shelf boxes, whatever we want to find them, then this would be a very interesting thing. And so I thought, well, I have this, actually this is part of my gaming rig, so you can see at the bottom of the screen, here's my Atari 2600 Junior. Here, which is actually not visible, is the Analog NT Mini, and the Neo Geo Mini, and the Namco TV. And on the left side, not visible here, is actually the NES and the Famicom. And this is actually covering most of my things. But I thought I got an FPGA system as well, and this is the Turbo Chameleon 64 version 2. Almost everything I'm going to tell you today is more or less the same for version 1. Maybe version 1 is not as powerful as version 2, so maybe some cores are not working on version 1. But when I was going through the cores and install them to my version, I have seen, I think, all of the time, at least most of the time, versions, core versions for version 1 as well. So that's actually not really important. And this is actually the way I ended up using it. And this is actually the TC64. This is the docking station. This is the OSSC scanline converter, whatever you want to call this. I think that's the name. And here we just have a an HDMI two-way splitter, so that I can record and have it on the screen at the same time. It's an HDMI selector, because now I got 4 HDMI devices here. And on the bottom is just an S-video composite to HDMI converter, which I'm using for the Namco, for example, or for the Atari 2600. So, and it took me quite a while to come to this. And the main reason is actually that I run into a lot of troubles. And let me switch back to the desk view. Because one of the main troublemakers, let's put it like this, on the TC64 is the VGA port. My TV, which we have seen partially, has an VGA input. And most of the things I have tested work just fine with the VGA port directly connected to the TV. But some weren't. And the problem is that if I want to record things like my gaming sessions or something like this, I need to convert VGA to HDMI or something like this. So it's not necessarily HDMI, but something like I can record, so to say. And there the trouble started. My TV is in HD ready, so it's not a full HD TV. And if you go into the direction of Amiga, for example, the Amiga AGA or something like this, then you find yourself in a let's say situation that the screen is simply too small, so the resolution of the screen. And if you have in mind that most of the retro systems, and I am referring most of to the 8-bit systems, they have a very unique resolution. And this resolution is actually meant to work on old CRT TVs via VHF, for example, and not to be converted to VGA and then to something else or something like this, and a digital LC display thingy. And yeah, that is actually the reason why the TC64 has some sort of a kind of hate-love life in my setup. It is a fantastic C64 cartridge, without any doubt. So you can do a lot of things, it's very interesting. But as soon as you leave the C64 world, you have to use the VGA port. And then the trouble starts. In the past, I have used this VGA to HDMI adapter, and this has worked quite okay-ish most of the time. And this was actually included in the setup you have seen briefly at the beginning of the video, because I had planned to use this as my main VGA converter for just doing some core flashes, updates, something like this. I'm using actually this one, and that's another cheap VGA to HDMI converter. But this one has the problem that the sound in isn't working. So the audio in that has to be routed from here to here supposed to be end up in the HDMI stream, but it isn't. So I got no sound with this one. But if I just need a picture, it's going to be fine. So, and when I started to dig a little bit deeper into the different cores available for the TC64, I recognized that some of them weren't showing a picture. And I thought, that's odd. That's really odd. And so I thought, let's test the OSSC. And I remember that the OSSC and the TC64 are not big friends. I had a couple of sync issues in the past, and I'm actually not sure whether this is now fixed or not. I haven't recognized it in most of the situations. Just came something to my mind. Anyway, and I have updated it some weeks, months ago or something like this, and never really tested it thoroughly. But anyway, so I thought, okay, let's test this one, and so I built the whole setup around the OSSC, and except for one core, everything is actually working fine. So I think I'm going to stick with this, and I'm going to, well, let's going to have some testing, gaming sessions whatsoever. But we were talking about costs. If I wouldn't have all those parts available, then we are actually on the same path like building a Mister FPGA system. Because the TC64 is not cheap, the OSSC is not cheap, and that's actually really something that adds to all that things. But anyway, that's not going to be the main thing. And yep, so long story short, I have installed a couple of cores on the TC64, and I did some testing, and what I have prepared for today is actually a list of videos, which is actually a little bit rough around the edges, so to say. And I'm just going to have some dubbing. I'm going to talk over this, and I just going through a couple of cores I have installed and tested. So what we are seeing here right now is the Atari 800 XL core. That's a kind of mixed mode core, so you can emulate or mimic, recreate, whatever you want to call this. Atari 400, 800, XL, not XL, I think XE systems, as well as the 5200 system as well. So I have just tested the 800 core so far, and it took me a little bit to get this running, because the manual is saying that you have to create a folder called Atari, and within this folder a folder called RAM, and you have to put the BIOS RAM into this folder, and the core wasn't working. So I moved that whole thing to the root and created the ROM and the user folder over there, and since then it is working. I think maybe that's the solution, I don't know. And yeah, and then I was looking for some ROM files, images, and I haven't figured out how to run disk image. So this is actually a cartridge image we are looking here, and actually this is working okay-ish. I have some issues with the sound. You may recognize that this is mostly or almost completely on the right side, so the left side is a little bit numb, and I don't know whether this is a setting or something like this issue, so that's actually something I have to check out. And yep, you got some configuration screens, and you got a couple of keys on your keyboard you have to use, and well, it's an Atari 800 XL, so you have a full keyboard available, and you got the basic, and you can program things, you can save things and all that stuff. So that's very cool to have this system available. And I was just test playing the Gyrus cartridge here for a brief moment. And not to get lost in this one, let's move on to the next thing. And let me just pause this for a while. So this is actually the list of cores I have installed. So the Chameleon, the core number 8, letter A. The Chameleon Vita 9QV2 is actually the C64 core. So if you boot up the Chameleon without a C64, something like this, then you are able to, well, play C64 games, do 64 things using exactly this core. Then B is the standard Minimic Amiga core, which I'm not using that much anymore, because if you look at D, there's the Minimic AGA Amiga core, and the main benefit or the main plus feature whatsoever is that the AGA core is supporting the CD32 remote control, and this makes life whole much easier and to operate that whole thing. And we're going to see some footage of this a little bit later. And core C, as we talked about already, is the Atari 800 core. And then we got on E the PC Engine core. I have tested just 2 games on it. That's Clax and R-Type. We're going to see this as well. Then we have some, let's say, real arcade cores. That's a Moon Patrol, Pac-Man, and Pingo, and they work fine as well. It's a little bit tricky to figure out how the controls are working because I think all of them support the CDTV remote control, but I couldn't get the joystick to work there, I think. So I may have taken some notes. Then we come to the Vectrex core, and this is actually causing still some troubles. And I think that's actually not an issue of the ROM files in the wrong place, something like this I was facing with the Terry core. Here I have a problem that the OSSC isn't able to sync to the TC64. So I got most of the time my TV is showing no input and my capture card is showing no input. But for a brief moment, every minute or so, I see a glimpse of a configuration menu. So that's something I really have to dig a little bit deeper, and that's actually one of the problems you probably won't fix, because if you're not getting the VGA converted to HDMI in a way that whatever HDMI device is able to do something with the signal, then you're simply not seeing anything at all. And I do not have VGA CRTs here at hand, so I may try to connect this directly to my TV and see if this is able to do something with it. But yeah, I mean, the Vectrex is a very specific or very special thing due to the, let's say, portrait format. It's not landscape, and I think this is screwing up the whole HDMI standard. So that's probably the reason why we can't see anything there. And then we got the Chameleon 2600 core. I have tested this briefly. It is a little bit uncomfortable, to put it this way, because if you flash the core, you have to flash a ROM file containing all the cartridge images you want to play. And actually it is limited to 4K cartridges and 2K cartridges if you double them, but no 8K 16 or something like this and bigger. So the range of games usable is very, very small, and I abandoned digging deeper in this because I have a 2600 on hand in real, and if not, then I have this as a core on the Analog NT Mini. So, and this is working quite fine. And then we got the ZX Spectrum core. It took me weeks to get this working, and that's actually a mix of SD card standards and not reading the manual with enough attention, let's say it like this. So at the beginning I had downloaded the wrong ROM file, so it wasn't working because the ROM file was wrong. Then I had it in the wrong place, and then I had the wrong SD card. I was really brave and went for, I think, a 64 gigabyte SD card with ultra high speed, something like this. And this is not supported by most of the cores. And now I went back to a very classic 16 gigabyte HC standard 4 cartridge, and this is actually doing the trick. So this has worked fine for, I think, all of this. And then core L is the Chameleon Live core. That's actually the game of life, and it is starting, but I have no idea what I have to do there. So I see a list with the rules, but it's not actually running or something like this. I cannot create a start pattern and something like this, but well, I will come back to this maybe later. So yeah, that's actually the list of cores I have on this device, and I think I'm going to, yep. This is the PC engine, and this is actually the configuration boot screen, something like this. And you can go through this, you can set up a couple of things like what sort of PC engine you are using, and if it's you can configure the video, for example. You can set it to scanline, no scanline, something like this. And here I was just briefly testing R-Type, and I just let it run in demo mode just to see if it is working fine. And it is actually doing a pretty nice job. And I'm really impressed about the system itself. So I mean, the PC engine is basically an 8-bit system with a 16-bit graphic IC unit, whatever I want to call this. So it's something in between, and I just kind of got attracted to it because I was watching a couple of YouTube videos about shoot 'em ups, and the PC engine is probably the system to go if you are into this genre, as we can see with R-Type, for example. And so I thought, well, that's going to be interesting, and let's have a look at this. But yeah, trying not to get lost in this, just another demo. How do we call this? Attract mode, whatever. And yeah, that's quite interesting, and it is so far working fine. I have tested Outrun as well. It wasn't starting. I'm not sure whether the ROM is defect or maybe I have to change the configuration a little bit. So, and you can even use a PC engine CD image. So if the game is available on CD only, then you're able to kind of mount this, and that's something I have to test as well, because there are a couple of games with fantastic soundtracks, and that's actually something I really want to discover as well. So then the next thing is very interesting. Yep, so that's the ZX Spectrum core. And as mentioned, I had a little bit a hard time to get this working, but finally it started quite fine. It's a little bit bright, so I may have to reconfigure the OSSC a bit. I think I have used... I had the Acorn Electron on it, and over RGB it has a bit of a dark image, so I had to crank up the brightness a little bit, so the input amplification, the amplification of the input signal, and therefore it looks a bit bright. So the ZX Spectrum core is actually named 128 because that's actually the main thing it is doing, but you can shrink it down to a standard ZX Spectrum as well. And you got the tape loader basic, calculator, and the 48 basic, so the older one, and the TR DOS, and you can configure a couple of things like RAM and options. Graphics and something like this, and it has actually the problem that it is not saving its settings, so I actually end up with this all the time. But fortunately you can kind of load tape images instantly, so you just have to kind of mount them. So I tried to sort my SD card a little bit, and then if the tape image is mounted and you go to tape loader, then it is put into memory instantly, so you do not have to wait all the time. And actually I'm waiting for something, I don't know. And here I was testing a new game. I think it was released last year or something like this, 2020, 21 or something like this. And I'm so blown away by the graphics and the intro itself is so fantastic. Let me just crank up the music a little bit. And if I consider the effort I put into the Acorn Electron, for example, with this SD card interface and getting images onto it and learning this rather complicated Acorn file system philosophy, and if I really think that for the ZX Spectrum I need to get something like this as well, an SD card interface, and have to step through all that stuff, it is indeed a bit overwhelming at a certain point, and therefore it is very comfortable to have this core on the TC64, because, well, you got the basic, you can really do your ZX Spectrum stuff as you want to use this. And you can save to the SD card as well, and yeah, you can actually play new games created for the system. And we're going to have a look at my very ridiculous driving. The game, I mean, it plays fantastically. No criticism, no doubt about this. But well, you really have to learn to handle the car. And I'm actually not that successfully with this one, but just have a look at the graphics. Isn't this amazing for the system? I'm so excited. I'm so blown away. I would never have thought that this is even remotely possible on a system like this. And even if it's just black and white, I mean, it looks amazing. And the animation and the details on the car, that's just so awesome. And I think I'm going to spend a little bit more time with this game. And you are able to configure the core using a keyboard. You can use the joystick. Here I was completely off with my steering. So there are many options, and using the docking station you can attach joysticks to the TC64. And therefore that's actually no problem. But well, let's move on to the next core, just to stay a bit in this stream. And this is actually the Amiga AGA core. And the interesting thing is that you can configure your Amiga system the way you really want this. So you can use the AGA core to just pretend to be an Amiga 500. So for the older stuff that won't run on newer systems, you can just shrink it down. You can actually somehow save the configuration. You got 5 configuration slots. I'm getting an error message right now. I really have to dig a little bit deeper what's actually causing this one. Perhaps that's another SD card problem or something like this. And the interesting thing is that if I try to run Turrican, it gives me a guru meditation. But if I just press the left mouse button and wait a couple of seconds, then it is starting fine. So I'm actually not sure whether this is a configuration issue, if this is a core issue whatsoever, but as long as it is actually booting, I'm really fine with this one. So, and I think I attempted to play the game a little bit as well. And here we can see this. And I think this is really impressive to see the range of systems, well, recreated by the TC64. So it's not just limited to 8-bit systems. Now it is really capable of running the Amiga AGA system with its full-blown configuration. And even if I'm not really skilled playing Turrican, especially not with a joystick, I really had a hard time getting shooting and jumping sorted out, and I was dying a lot, but actually I was just digging into the game briefly to see if it is working fine. And yeah, I made it to the top 10, to the top 10 list, and had a typo, so I had to go back and do it again. Anyway, just a little hint to not forget all that YouTube thingies. And then back to the ZX Spectrum. This was actually the main driver for doing that whole project, because I really wanted to play Nebulous on the ZX Spectrum, because this version is even graphically a bit shrink down, but it plays so well, and it plays better than the NES/Famicom versions. I really have to admit this. It is very smooth. There's actually no stuttering, no hiccup, something like this. The timing is a little bit different compared to the C64 or to the Game Boy version, for example. But beside this, it plays very fantastic. And I'm so... Probably I was going to mess with the controls, something like this. I don't know. I think... I think I got a playthrough of the first tower and made it to the next. Let me just jump through the video. Yeah, here we go. So I finished this one, and the towers are just swapping colors. So that's the actually difference. And this makes it a bit like the original version where the towers have different colors. And yet the animation is there. Everything is really looking fine. So, and yeah, indeed, C64 is possible as well. So this is actually an CRT image of Bomberland, the cartridge game I have as well. And that's actually my go-to game for testing things on systems, because it has a very nice attract mode. You can just leave it there and it is doing its own thing, playing music and having all that stuff going on the screen. And yeah, that's going to be my main, let's say, C64 platform for C64 gaming on my gaming rig. And yeah, that's actually, I think, the end of my video list, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, that's actually the end. And now we just start with the beginning. So let's head back to my desk to round this up a little bit. The TC64 is using PS2 devices, so that's actually keyboard, mouse, and here you can attach an IEC cable, and you can use the TC64 as an external floppy device on your C64. Something that's a little bit odd to handle, I have to admit. I've tested this in the past quite a while. But you need a display to select disk images, and then everything becomes a bit complicated, so to say. So anyway, and you have to power the whole thing over USB Mini, which is a very wacky connection. So I really have to come up with an idea how to make this a bit more stable, because most of the USB Mini cables I have in my setup are really very loose, and quite often I recognize that if you just move the cable a little bit, the whole thing is rebooting. So that's actually not very smart in my opinion. And the next thing is that the whole cartridge is actually missing a power switch. So if you want to get out of a core and the core has not the option to jump back to the TC64, and I think there's just one core that's capable of doing so, and that was, I think, the PC Engine core. I am actually not sure. Then you have to unplug that whole thing and put the plug back in it. So I really have to build myself something that I can sort of support this plug and have a power switch. I had the idea to power this over the docking station, but I really have to check if this is actually possible, because the docking station is powered by the TC64 and in standalone mode, and I really have to check whether there are some voltage regulators or something like this. I may mess up if I put power on this one and hoping that it is going to power the TC64. In C64 mode, this is covered, so if you plug this into your C64, then you cannot power this by USB because it is powered by the C64. Hence the idea, it should be possible to power it with the docking station, but if individual computers haven't come up with the solution, there might be an issue and might be a reason not to do so. But I think I really have to kind of improve this a little bit. And yep, as mentioned already, you have USB. You have your game ports here. You can add up to 4 joysticks if you are in 4-player mode. Unfortunately, I lost the pin. It just fell out. And that's actually the fire button for player 4. So no 4-player games anytime soon. You got MIDI in, MIDI out. Some cores are supporting this. I think there's an Atari something core that's actually utilizing MIDI. That would be a very interesting project for the future, to hook up some synthesizer-like devices and use the TC64 with Atari tracker DAW software to make some music. You can connect a C64 keyboard as well as an Amiga 500 keyboard. So plenty of options. I went for this old Cherry keyboard I'm using for this things, because that's very comfortable. If I sit on a chair in front of my gaming rig, then I can put this on my lap and then I can just use the keyboard to play whatever, Pinball Dreams on the Amiga or something like this. And yeah, that's basically all that is to say about that whole thing. I think half of the cores presented today, maybe 2/3 of them, supporting the CDTV remote control. It is way more comfortable to play with this than it may look, because these are not 4 separate keys. This is really a cross, as you know this from game controllers. And you got actually 2 fire buttons. That makes it quite comfortable. And some cores are even utilizing additional keys, like pause, for example, and yeah, accessing the Chameleon buttons here, so to get into the configuration menu or something like this. So quite often I find myself using even this one. Or, as I said, you can connect your joystick or your gamepad or something like this, and then you can just play your games the way you want. And this is actually very, very advanced compared to the C64 Mini, because here I can use the Nunchuck 64 adapter. I can use NES pad gamepads on the TC64 as well, which wasn't possible on the C64 Mini, and I even can use standard Competition Pro joysticks. The range of USB joysticks supported by the C64 Mini is indeed limited, and I'm actually not really motivated to hack the kernel as I have done a couple of years ago. So that's actually a bit over my knowledge, motivation, whatever you want to put this. Anyway, conclusion, well, is it a whole replacement for the Mister FPGA? Short answer, no. Long answer, it depends. So the Mister FPGA has a much wider range of cores, and most of the cores I have installed on the TC64 are at least a year old, even some of them just 2 or 3 years old. So development has really kind of came to a halt for the course of this thing. There is a, let's say, there is some light on the horizon because I forgot the name, has developed some sort of a wrapper. So they use the FPGA, the Mister FPGA cores in combination with a wrapper to put this on other FPGA systems. And this brought the Amiga AGA core, for example, to the TC64. But I wouldn't bet on it. So if you're really interested in a variety of systems, and if you want to have, let's say, support by a huge community of people, something like this, then the Mister FPGA is exactly the way to go, in my opinion. If you like to tinker a little bit, if you are able to even say, okay, it's not working, I don't care, let's use something else. And if you really want to dig into topics, then, well, yeah, that's actually a useful platform, especially if you have one already. So I wouldn't recommend buying one, especially for this reason. But if you combine this with some C64 usage, for example, if you have some projects where this makes sense in terms of cartridge emulation, floppy drive emulation, and so on, as a turbo cartridge. So if you want to speed up a couple of things, and there are some game conversions or some game versions that really benefit from the turbo option, then you got actually 2 birds in one hand, whatever you want to call this, because you got an excellent C64 cartridge as well as an FPGA system able of running different systems on it. And yeah, that's actually my answer to this one. And basically we will see a couple of videos coming out of this in the future, because as I said, I'm going to use this in my gaming rig, and things I can't play with the analog NT Mini, for example, will be played by this one. And yep, that's actually the end of the video. As usual, thanks a lot for watching, and I'm looking forward to your thoughts, to your comments, so feel free. And if you haven't done so, feel free to subscribe as well, or if you want to support my channel, then feel free to join or to just support me on Patreon. So thanks a lot for watching, and see you next time.